Going live. Thanks for bearing with me. Always got to be something. Perfect. There we are. All right. We are live. I will start sharing my screen and we will get started. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Let the last couple folks in and let's get rolling. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. This is the UWSP Student Chapter of the Wildlife Society's General Member Meeting. And going to be a good one for you today, so thanks for showing. So our projects are getting going here for the spring semester, so if you guys want to get out on those, do some volunteering. We do have dues. Those dues are $5 a semester or $8 a year. And for those that have been using the online payment, it used to be my PayPal, but we have now got our own PayPal for the UWSP TWS there. If you already paid to mine, do not worry, your funds are in. We are just now, if you're going to pay, you can use this one. So that is how you do that. Otherwise, I do have an office hour on Mondays from 11 to noon, where you can come in and see me and hand me some cash if you prefer that. And if you guys are using the PayPal, make sure you use friends and family so you guys don't receive that charge. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
All right, along with dues, we have a couple other things to get you guys out on projects. We have just a general membership form, which I can put in the chat in a few minutes. And then dues, like Nate said, and then hold harmless forms. I sent those out after the meeting last week. If you didn't get that, let me know. You can send me an email and I can just send you the form. But you can fill it out, either like print it, sign it, scan it, send it back to me, or you can fill it out with Adobe Reader, whatever floats your boat. Just make sure you put your full name in the document title when you send it back and make the subject line of your email TWS Hold Harmless. And then to make sure you're getting all of our emails, join us on Spin so we can add you to the list.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Lizzie.
So for last week's conservation topic, if you guys remember, I talked about the notorious white nose syndrome. Well, this week, this is another disease that you guys should really be familiar about because it's a big one in the wildlife world. So there's recent studies done to see if salamanders and just like other amphibians showed any resistance to chytrid fungus. So chytrid fungus, if you guys don't know what it is, it's obviously a fungus, and there's kind of two types, which is B-sal and BD. Now, those stand for scientific names that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. So I'm just going to call them B-sal and BD. B-sal has not been discovered in North America yet. It originated from, I think, Asia or Europe. So it's affecting populations out there, whereas BD has been affecting a lot of amphibian populations in the United States. So this, in the study that they did, they took skin peptides, which some have been known to show antimicrobial properties. So they took these skin peptides from a couple different species of salamanders, including eastern hellbenders, spotted salamanders, red-legged salamanders, and Osoi salamanders. And they combined these with these two strains of chytrid fungus. So they took these peptides and like mixed them in with B-sal and BD to see like which ones would show resistance to which diseases. And they found that really it varied a lot. So red-legged salamanders and Osoi salamanders, their peptides were very susceptible to both chytrid fungi. They didn't really inhibit it at all. Whereas the spotted salamanders, their skin peptides actually inhibited both types of fungi. And then eastern hellbenders were kind of a mixed result. They inhibited B-sal, but not BD. So like, just to remind you that eastern hellbenders would be inhibiting the one that's in Europe and Asia, and not the chytrid fungus that's in North America. So this is important because really it's only a matter of time until B-cell reaches America. Like we can try and prevent it. We can try and keep, like exotic amphibians from coming in, but eventually it's probably just going to reach here. And with this knowledge, we can like target which species would be more susceptible to B-cell than others. Since BD is already in America, we're already trying to take steps to help those populations. But when B-cell comes, we can really focus on which species are going to be the worst off with it. So with that, we can move on into our quiz bowl. Got lots of salamander stuff for you guys today. Which of these salamanders is listed as a species of special concern in Wisconsin? Is it the blue spotted salamander, the eastern red-backed salamander, the four-toed salamander, the eastern tiger salamander, or the spotted salamander? See how well you guys know your amphibians.
Answers rolling in. Very even spread.
Mm-hmm.
Give you guys 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, mad close race. 1. Okay, ending it. There's the results.
You guys barely got it. It is indeed the four-toed salamander. I took that right from the DNR's website. So that's just since their populations are already like pretty concerning. We, when B-cell comes to America, we should probably focus on them and see like how susceptible they're actually going to be to it, and if their populations are potentially in even more jeopardy. So that's all I got with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie.
All right, very exciting news. You guys remember me talking last semester about the buttons, and we took the poll to see which professor we were going to make it out of? Well, this is the buttons. They are printed, made, everything ready for sale. So we're going to be selling them for $1 each. That's just the usual. And we do actually still have some Sartini and a few Dubé buttons still for sale. But to buy them, you can come to Nate's office hour. He is going to be like in the physical TWS office in the TNR. And his office hour is from 11 o'clock to noon on Mondays. And that's in TNR 359A. If that doesn't work for you at all, you can email me. I'll send my email in the chat and we can work something out. Because I know this 1 hour time slot probably won't work for everyone, but hey, if it does, then come pick up some buttons. Super exciting stuff. And then lastly, TWS is going to be sending out a survey, and we would just really appreciate it if you guys could take a few minutes out of your day just to answer it. I'll send you guys an email right after this meeting, so you can answer it today, tomorrow, whenever, just whenever you get a chance. And it will help us get some feedback on how we've been doing, just with COVID and like just in general too, how we've been doing with the society. So yeah, thanks in advance for your feedback.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lizzie. Brylan.
So these are just a couple reminders for anybody who has anything that I need, and that includes COVID travel forms if you haven't submitted them already, any conference registration or TR travel forms, and if you're planning on purchasing anything with your budgets, make sure you send what you're gonna buy and the amount to me, and then I can help you along and see if you need any help submitting those forms, and then a confirmation email that you have received your items. And you can email any forms or questions to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Treasurer Brylan. Mackenzie.
Hey everyone. So I'm here to talk about the Wisconsin chapter of the TWS's Society annual winter meeting. And like I said last week, registration is now open. I sent a sponsorship application, and that's due this Friday by midnight. So this year it's a little different with if you sign up to be a state member for the Wisconsin's TWS, which is $10, you will be able to go to the conference for free. So if you do the sponsorship application, we will pay for the $10 fee. And this conference will be taking place virtually from Monday, February 22nd to Thursday, February 25th. Also, email completed applications or any questions to me, and there's my email. This is a great first conference to attend if you're really nervous about attending conferences. This is going to be a really good one. They're going to be talking about anything from large mammals to human dimensions. So it's just going to be a really cool time.
It's never been easier to go to conferences, guys. It's a great way to network with professionals, see a bunch of cool research. So apply and we'll cover your costs for you. Thank you, Mackenzie. Jacob, are you out there?
Everyone. So UWSP Fire Crew is sponsoring their spring 2021 Wildland Firefighter course. Dues will be due in about 10 days, so make sure to submit if you're interested in this. It's a 5-day course this semester, $150. 2 of the days are virtual, and then the other 3 you come in and you get to play with fire and learn about tools and safety stuff. Pretty interesting stuff that you use in wildlife, so definitely would take advantage of taking this course. And if you have any questions, you can email me below, and I'll also attach the form link.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Shelby.
Hello, everyone. Every Friday, we feature a wildlife photo taken by one of our members on our Instagram and our Facebook page for what we call Fauna Friday. So if you've taken any cool wildlife photos in the past or recently, you can send them in by DMing our Instagram page at UWSP_TWS or by emailing me, and my email is up there on the slide. And then you can follow our student chapter on multiple social media platforms. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. You can even add us on Snapchat with the code up on the slide. And our meetings are also recorded, so if you ever miss one, you can find those recordings on both our website and our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby. So that does it for announcements. Just a quick announcement for next week. We have Travis Booms, who's an Alaskan wildlife researcher working with a lot of cool species, anywhere from snowshoe hares all the way up to grizzly bears. Going to be a super cool presentation, and he's actually a past UWSP president, so super cool. Get excited for that one. But without further ado, this week we have Rory Pulaski and Rich Staffen from the Wisconsin DNR, and they are Massasauga rattlesnake researchers. So to give you guys the maximum amount of time, I will stop my share, and thank you guys so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Rich is going to be sharing, doing his screen, so I'll just have to go through and have him advance the slides.
Hey, can everybody see that all right?
Looks good.
Yes.
Good deal. So I'm just going to give a little background about myself, and then I'm going to pass it over to Rory to take it away, but I'll be back in a little bit to talk about a couple other aspects of the Massasauga rattlesnake work that we do. So as Nate said, my name is Rich Staffen, and I am a conservation biologist and zoologist, focusing on vertebrate species, and I work in the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. We were formerly called the Endangered Resources Program, but changed our name about 5 or 6 years ago now to Natural Heritage Conservation. And I focus on birds, reptiles and amphibians, and small mammals and some other mammals. And we work a lot with non-game and, as I mentioned, rare species as well. So I've been working for the DNR for about 20 years, and specifically on the Massasauga rattlesnake for about the last 5 years, where Rory and I have been kind of co-leads on work with this rattlesnake. So I'll turn it over to Rory now to take it from here.
Cool. Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so I don't know if Nate even knew this, but I got my master's from Point. So it's fun to see some of the old stuff. I loved the Kitchard info, and yes, the fire training I would highly recommend. I took that while I was doing my master's, and it's been great to have that. You know, even if I don't get out on burns a lot, it's great just to have that knowledge of fires, because Rich and I both do a lot with management, and it's good to know a lot of those techniques. So I would highly recommend it. Yeah, I've been at the DNR a little less than Rich. I've been there about 15, 16 years. And I primarily work on herps, whereas Rich does more general zoology. I also do endangered species regulation. And like Rich mentioned, our program does all non-game work, which is awesome. And I think before I started my master's, I didn't even know that, you know, I thought the DNR was all hunting and fishing and deer and whatever. So there are about maybe 90 of us in our program scattered throughout the state. So yeah, I think we have awesome jobs and get to work on a lot of the rare species and non-game species. So today we wanted to give you a little bit of background on the Massasauga. So I'm going to take, we have this divided into 4 sections. I'm going to take the first, give you a little bit of background on the Massasauga and talk about some long-term monitoring that we're doing for the species. And then we'll switch over and Rich will take it and then talk about some surveys we're doing at historic sites and then management that we do for the species as well. Okay. Okay, so the Massasauga rattlesnake, this is a small snake. It's kind of deceptively looks bigger, I think, in pictures sometimes. It never gets to 3 feet. They're generally about 2 feet long, kind of chunky snakes like a lot of other rattlesnakes. And this is one of 2 rattlesnakes we have in Wisconsin. Some people are surprised to learn that, the other being the timber rattlesnake. This is definitely the smaller of the 2. And it's had the nickname in the past of swamp rattler. Generally, when you think of rattlesnakes, you know, most of us think of, you know, drier areas, deserts. This species is unique in that it likes wetland habitats. So looking at the habitat for the Massasauga, in the winter, the Massasauga is pretty confined to floodplain forests and wetlands. They'll use open and closed canopy. And then in the summer, they move out quite a bit more. And that would be, you know, the juvenile males are dispersing a little bit more. They'll look for open areas. All of the adults and juveniles will look for open areas. So they always like that edge habitat, like a lot of herps, so they can have thermoregulate better. So they have some open areas, some closed areas. And then the females, this is a live bearing snake. So the females, when they're gravid or pregnant, they prefer to be in really warm, sunny areas as it helps the young develop faster. And then for the diet, small mammals are actually the primary prey, followed by amphibians, as you would guess from the wetland habitats. Population status for this species, the primary threats historically have been human persecution, and that definitely still is a concern for us. But habitat alteration, including hydrologic changes, are a big issue for this species. So that could be, you know, any kind of state property, federal property where they're doing drawdowns at the wrong time of the year in the winter. That could be really detrimental to the species. And in Wisconsin, so this kind of grayish beige color, this is the historic range of the Massasauga. And then it's declined significantly in Wisconsin. So we're down to 8 sites, excuse me. And it may not look like it from this map with all the green, but we only have 8 sites left. They're kind of split over some counties, but we are, the species has been in pretty bad shape in Wisconsin and throughout its range. shockingly, for a lot of people to learn, we had a bounty on both of our rattlesnake species in Wisconsin until 1975. And in that same month, they removed the bounty, and about 3 weeks later put the Massasauga on one of the first endangered species lists. So you would have hoped they would have had a little bit more foresight than that, but at least we still have it. It's been extirpated from some states, so it's great that we still have the species here as part of our landscape. It was added as a federal candidate species in 1998 and then listed as federally threatened in 2016. So our long-term monitoring. So this is our main work research that we do for the species each year. Now that the species is federally listed, Fish and Wildlife has been involved with a lot of our surveys, which is great. We can kind of coordinate better across states. And I didn't actually have a map up of the federal, the range, the national range for the species, but it's primarily Wisconsin, Illinois, over into New York, Ontario, Pennsylvania, and Michigan is the stronghold for the species. They have 90 sites. So we've been working a lot with Fish and Wildlife, and their protocols are for each state to select one primary site. So we've selected our Buffalo County site. And within that site, we do visual encounter surveys and then do mark recapture of all the individuals that we find. And previously, we used to have a lot of contractors that would do surveys maybe for 2 or 3 months during the summer. And based on some research that the Fish and Wildlife has done, they found that it was actually more effective to do just 1 week of spring surveys. The vegetation is down, the snakes are closer. If you remember, I talked about where they overwinter. They're all overwintering in the wetlands. So the snakes haven't dispersed yet for the year. So 1 week of surveys with almost as many people as we can get. Obviously with COVID restrictions, it's probably going to be a little bit different this year, but we generally try to have about 20 people out. And then we will be doing surveys for 5 straight years. And then after that, once every 5 years. And we've kind of been, we meant to do 1 year of a pilot, and we're kind of on year 3 or 4 of a pilot. We had flooding 1 year at one of our sites. The next year, really cold spring, and we were crunching ice as we were walking through the wetlands. So we thought last year was going to be our year, and well, it was 2020, so it was not our year to really get started. So hopefully this year. So what I wanted to do is go through with you guys just some general, go through kind of a day in our surveys, how we do these. So you can just kind of see from a fieldwork perspective what we're doing and the data we're collecting. We don't have a lot of data yet, but I will include a little bit on that. So for the long-term monitoring, we have several objectives, but collecting demographic data is our primary purpose, at least at this point, just to get some baseline data for the population. So this is what our Massasauga surveys look like. So we have, again, 10 to 20 people that are out. Everyone has a snake hook, and we are walking in a line, trying to, stay pre-COVID, a few feet apart, 3 to 5 feet apart, so that we could be looking, ideally each person would be, having their own kind of transect that they're walking, and we just move up in a line across the site, and then we would repeat that at the same site, possibly going to some different areas, but repeat that for 4 or 5 days. So this is a Massasauga, and they're pretty well camouflaged. You can see there's not a lot of greenery up yet in the spring. And this is about the easiest you would ever find them, which, they're hanging out, they're easy to find, they're easy to grab. These guys don't move much. Usually when we see them, they just sit still, and they're pretty easy to pick up. The next slide then this is a little bit harder snake to find. And this is obviously zoomed in, but you can imagine, walking through these reed canary fields, even though they're tramped down, which the species, luckily for them, uses reed canary, they can be really, really hard to spot. And, Rich and I talk about, I can't imagine how many of these we've stepped over and not even seen. And hopefully not stepped on. But they can be really, really hard to find. Rich and I both had been at a conference in Ohio, Wildlife Society conference a couple of years ago, and saw a really interesting research project where they're starting to use drones with heat sensors on them to locate Massasaugas. So we've been thinking about trying to try that out. Luckily, the DNR has some folks that are starting to use drones. Some of our pilots are. So we'd really like to include that in, because obviously, as you can see, they can be pretty hard to find, and I'm sure we're missing a lot of them. So once we find the snakes, everyone has snake tongs. These are, and I don't know, I'm sure some of you have done some rattlesnake surveys before. I'm sure some of you haven't done any. So these are what we call gentle giant tongs. That's the brand name. They actually have a special kind of spring release on them. So the old snake tongs that people used to use, you could literally cut the snake too hard, and people once in a while would chop the snakes in half, which is not our goal, of course. These are nice because they prevent that from happening. So we can just grab them and not have to worry about injuring the snakes. And then they all go in a bucket. These are actually just like 5-gallon buckets that you'd get at, Home Depot, Lowe's. But then they have special bags and a cover that go on top of them. And because we want to be careful, we're not recounting for our snake's sake and for the snake's sake. We collect everything maybe for like the first 2 or 3 hours of the day before lunch and process everything and then let the snakes go. So we do temporarily hold them. And once we start processing, once we have all of our snakes collected, at this site, which is our best site, on a good day, we would get, like in our morning session, maybe 8 to 10 snakes that we would have to process. So once we get them, it's pretty standard workup for them. So here they're getting weighed. They each get weighed individually, and then we're taking GPS locations on all of the snakes. So we put them back fairly close, within a few meters or a meter of where we found them. And then we have a technique called tubing that we use for venomous animals. The zoos use this a lot, and some of you may be familiar with this. And so what I'm holding there are they're just like clear tubes, like inside of wrapping paper rolls. And we get the snakes to go in one, and then we're able to do more with the snake, obviously, and the head is secure then. So this is a picture. Once the snake is in the tube, part of the work is figuring out which size tube. We have like 8 different size tubes, which one will fit best and won't allow the rattlesnake to turn around. But once we get it, it's usually pretty quick once we get him in. What our coworker Joe is doing here is looking at the snake for evidence of snake fungal disease, similar to the chytrid funguses. That's an emerging disease for snakes. So the first thing we do once we have them in the tubes is just inspect them to see if they're healthy. And on the next slide, so here then we'll get measurements on the snake. So standard measurements, snout to vent, and then tail length. And we want to have 3 different methods of marking the snakes. Fish and Wildlife really wants to make sure that we're incorporating or that we're not missing any snakes. So we want to make sure we don't have a snake that we saw and might lose it at some point. So our primary method is pit tagging. These snakes are big enough that we feel comfortable pit tagging them, and rattlesnakes, surprisingly, have really loose skin, so they're pretty easy to pit tag. So that's our primary method of marking these guys. And the second method then is looking at the patterns on the rattlesnake. So luckily, when we have them in the bucket, it's an easy place to take a picture and get a great dorsal shot of them. And so you can see the spots or blotches, we call them saddles for the Massasauga. The dorsal spots on these guys outside of the yellow circles are all pretty uniform, kind of figure 8, shaped. But they have almost all of them have unique unique spots. And so we try to look at those and get up to 4 different unique patterns. And so this is, you know, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, like in emerging field and wildlife ecology, looking at anything from giraffes to sea turtles to, you know, spotted salamanders, and looking at the unique patterns to uniquely identify an individual. And so this is how we do it on the Massasauga. We haven't put it into software yet, but that would be the next step. Right now, we've been doing it visually. We have a small enough number of snakes, we can do that. So you can see, like on number 1, there's kind of a smaller spot to the side. Number 2, you know, 2 blotches are kind of connected on the left side, and then the second blotch is kind of separate. Same with 3, they're connected. And then 4, we're looking at there, that's the first time that the dorsal spot touches the lateral spot. So, you know, on first glance, it might not look like a lot of unique patterns on the snake, but there's actually quite a bit of information we can get off of these guys. So that's kind of our backup method if the pit tags would fail or if the snakes would lose their pit tags, but they seem to keep them in pretty well. And our backup method, and this is kind of just for the year, 1 year at a time. Since we're out there steadily for 1 week, we want to make sure for our time and for the stress of the snakes that we're not picking up snakes that we just picked up yesterday. So each of them, it's a little hard to tell, he does have the snake in a tube there. They do get painted at the end of their rattle. And so we use green, and obviously we don't want to use some bright color like red or pink, something that blends in well. And so the snake, we can see it from a few feet away. And if it is, this will wear off over the years. So if we have one from last year that we collected, there'd be maybe just a little bit of paint between the rattles. But we can tell if it's a fresh paint, and if it was something we just collected the day before, we don't need to worry about it. And then we'll walk on and not bother the snake. So that is the finished product there with the green on the tail. And so this is a snake. This one was a little unusual in that it was in kind of pine plantation habitat. You can see by the needles on the ground, but this snake we put back within a couple inches of where it was found. You can kind of see he's got his green rattle there. So hopefully not any worse for the wear, minus his green rattle. And then I didn't have a slide for results, but just generally, we've been getting about 10 snakes per year at our site. We're really anxious to get an actual full year of data in at the site, and I'm guessing we may not be able to get a full year of work in at the site this year with COVID, but the snakes will be there next year too, so we'll get in what we can this year. You know, and once we get a few years of data under our belts, we'll be able to look a little bit more at demographics at the site, look at juveniles, you know, versus adults, age range of the snakes, and just get a little bit more information on population size too, of course, with the mark recapture. We did find snake fungal disease, which has been a again, you know, an emerging threat for snakes, and it's really been decimating Massasauga populations in Illinois. We're kind of one of the poster children for snake fungal disease. Massasaugas are almost extirpated from Illinois, primarily, well, originally from persecution and habitat alteration, but in the last few years, really just because of snake fungal disease. They had 4 sites, and I've heard they're pretty much down to 1 site. So we did find snake fungal disease at our site, our long-term monitoring site in 2018. And the snake was pretty far along with the disease, but it was the only one we found. We did send samples in to be sure that's what it was. But the good news was when we went back in 2019, you know, we had 10 to 12 snakes that we did workups on that year, and none of them had snake fungal or any very obvious signs of it. So hopefully, if it is impacting the population, it's just in small amounts, and that they're able to deal with that, and we don't have the same issues as Illinois. So that is it for the long-term monitoring, and I'll hand it over to Rich.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the historical site surveys that we've done for Massasauga in the past 5 years or so. So this was kind of initiated by the federal listing in 2016 for the Massasauga. And at that time, we realized that for a lot of our sites where we thought there was still Massasaugas, they hadn't been observed there or no survey efforts in 15, 20, or 30 years. So I figured it was well past time to try and get back out there and see what the status of these populations were. So to do this, we're following the survey protocol from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And this calls for 40 person hours of survey effort to make a determination on presence or absence. And that also, in addition to those 40 person hours, has to be span 10 years worth of those surveys to make any kind of a determination on the presence or absence. Techniques that we can use to do this work include cover objects. So putting out cover boards like 3 foot by 4 foot plywood boards in uplands, usually very close to wetlands, where the snakes might go for cover or to thermal regulate. We've done that at a few sites. The primary one is visual encounter surveys, where we go to a site the proper time of year and the appropriate habitat and look, just do some meandering surveys with a certain number of people and see if we can find any snakes through visual searches. Another survey technique is road cruising. So we've utilized this to some extent on some properties where we have very little access. So it's probably usually private land and we don't have permission to go out there or can't get permission. So we would do road cruising to look for either basking individuals trying to warm up on the road, or ones that have unfortunately been run over by a car. You can find road-killed snakes that way too. And then the last one is drift fence arrays with funnel traps. And we've done that at a few sites where we've had difficulty finding snakes and we're trying to improve our detection probabilities. And then in regards to timing of surveys, we primarily focus our survey efforts in the morning hours, usually try and get started by 9 o'clock in the morning and focus surveys from 9 to 12, 9 to noon. When the snakes are most active, they're most desperate for warmth, so they're a little bit more exposed, and they're also actively out foraging and moving around, so they're a little bit more detectable at that time. And then in regards to air temperature, the protocol speaks of doing the surveys between the temperatures of 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So we usually, that falls in that morning 9 to 12 range. So we're perfect with that. And then another consideration is cloud cover. So it specifies to do the surveys when there's at least 50% cloud cover. What that does is just cuts down on the amount of direct sunlight hitting the ground, so that it slows that process of the snakes warming up. So you have a little bit more time in the morning before they get too hot and move out of the open. And then in regards to timing, seasonal timing, as Rory mentioned, we are doing a lot of spring surveys. This is for various reasons. Snakes are close to their hibernacula sites, as Rory talked about. Then also the vegetation is matted down from the winter snow. So the snakes often are basking out on that matted vegetation. And it's before the everything greens up and gets really rank, and it's really hard to see the snakes. So you have a little bit better opportunity to see individuals this way. Then we're also focusing a little bit of effort in late summer, so July and August, when we're looking for gravid females that are really desperate for warmth. And they tend to move into these upland areas, sandy barrens, oak barrens that are fairly open, and they can be pretty easily detected at this time too. So that's another later in the season opportunity to do some surveys. So looking a little bit at these 8 sites that Rory mentioned, we'll go through each of these a little bit more detail and talk about what we found there. So the first is Columbia County. This might have been the most surprising and shocking find. This is primarily public land. They hadn't been found here since 1976, but we had a volunteer surveyor get photographs of an adult at this site in 2016. So we were ecstatic about being able to find a snake here. Done a little bit of searching since then, and we're continuing to do some surveys here, but we haven't found any additional snakes at this site. But we do believe, obviously, that it's an extant site. The next one is Walworth County, where we have 2 fairly close by sites. This one's been a little bit frustrating. It's largely public land, but we've done surveys here for the last 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, with no snakes found. So we actually tried in 2019 to do some drift fences with funnel traps to see if we could increase our chances of finding any, and still came up with none. So we have several more years to go before we can say that they're not present here, but there's some concern about whether the snakes are still here or not. Next is Monroe and Jackson County site. This one's kind of interesting, and it's we did some surveys where they were historically found, and didn't find any there, unfortunately. But almost at the same time, in 2016, we had a photo of one in about probably a mile or 2 away in the same wetland complex, but just a good distance away. And we've been back there several times since in subsequent years, and we found decent numbers of snakes here. So this one is still considered the same population, but a little bit disjunct from where they were historically. So, but we do believe that there might be a substantial population here. So good news on that front. Also in Jackson County, not too far away, is another site that was interestingly, we thought that they might have been extirpated from here because there was a mistimed or ill-timed drawdown in the winter, which we feared had exposed the snakes. But in 2015, we got a video from a citizen who was out there, and lo and behold, they had found a Massasauga at this site. And we've been out there almost annually, and we've gotten annual reports from other DNR staff of Massasaugas at this site. So they are still indeed present and extant here. And the hope is that this was a good sized population before. So we believe or hope that there might be a substantial population here. Juneau County, this one's a mix of public and private land, kind of limited in where we can do the surveys, including where they were historically found here. We're not able to access that parcel. So we've been limited to primarily doing roadside cruising and a little bit of visual encounter surveys, and haven't found a snake here since 2005. One interesting feature here was that we got a report from the National Wildlife Health Center of a dead or a deceased bald eagle, that the cause of death was from a rattlesnake bite. And this was in close proximity to where this site was. So there's no timber rattlesnakes for quite a ways away. So we believe that this might have been, the bald eagle might have been bitten by a Massasauga rattlesnake, and that was in 2018. So we might be able to potentially update that last observation date to much more recent. But we're going to continue to look for snakes here, hopefully increase our survey effort there. Then we already talked about Buffalo County. That's probably our best population in the state. We're doing frequent surveys and monitoring there. And then the last one is La Crosse County, largely public land. We've been kind of limited in our surveys there. We've tried to get out, but we're limited by flooding and haven't been able to do many surveys, but we did get a report, had fairly recent reports, including a 2018 photo from a hunter at this site. So they're still present there. And then moving into habitat management work that we're doing for Massasauga rattlesnakes. So we're trying to address a couple of important threats through this work. Largely, one of the main threats is brush encroachment in wetlands. So we're doing mowing in some of these wetlands in the wintertime to set back that brush encroachment. We're also doing dropping trees at the wetland edges to improve and add more basking opportunities for snakes. And then also working in some of these adjacent uplands to known wetland sites where we can improve the habitat or expand the habitat for these gravid females, which we talked a little bit about. And this one in particular, and some of the others are in general to reduce potential road crossing mortality. And we'll talk a little bit about a site where this was occurring and how we've worked to eliminate that. So here's an example of one of our mowing, winter mowing brush control sites. You can see in those areas 1 and 2, that's where we focused a lot of our mowing to date. And we also have overlaid the Massasauga hits in different colors corresponding to different years of survey for those sites. So one area in particular, which we could focus on is this area, and this area 2 down here on the southeast, where you can see kind of the signature brush moving in. We did some mowing out there in 2018, winter of 2018, and went back in 2019 and had really good luck finding Massasaugas that had moved into this area where we eliminated some of the brush. So here's kind of what that looked like from the ground. Primarily it's open, but you can see in the background, there's kind of this wall of brush moving in. And this is where we focus some of that mowing effort. So it gets really hard to walk in there to look for snakes. They're harder to find. And eventually it just becomes too shaded for the snakes to even utilize it anymore. So we've focused on knocking back that brush encroachment. Here's area 1 at that same site. You can kind of imagine how thick that had gotten. And we went out there that spring. This is a photo from May, and we find snakes, Massasaugas, right out in this area where they had been mowed in the wintertime. So they move into these areas really quickly and take advantage of this open sunlight and open canopy. Here's a site where we were focusing on some of the dropping logs, dropping trees at the edge of the wetland in this yellow hatched area. We did a lot of tree felling there, and this adds basking areas for where the snakes like to hang out on top of those logs. So we make them nice and flush with the ground. They can get up there and bask. It's also escape cover for the snakes. And then it also provides good habitat for some of their prey, like small mammals. So it accomplishes numerous goals. Also at this site, we talked a little bit about creating that upland gestating habitat. So in these red outlined areas, we work to open these areas up and create habitat for gravid females. And then we went back, so some of this work was done in early 2019. We were there in the summer of 2019, and we found two Massasaugas at this westernmost upland site, and then also 2 Massasaugas at this easternmost site. And this was largely because you can see we had reports of dead on the road Massasaugas, 1 in 2017, 1 in 2018. They were trying to, we believe, crossing this road because there was a kind of an odor clear cut over here. So they were trying to get to these open areas. So we wanted to open up some of these habitats so they wouldn't have to cross the road. And so far in 2019 and 2020, we did not get any reports of road-killed snakes on this road. So seemingly, fingers crossed, it seems like it's helped or worked in that respect. Here's what that site, one of those sites looks like on the ground. So this one, they had planted some young pines. So they went in and cut and knocked down those pines, piled them up into brush piles, and moved them over, some cases in the middle of the opening and other cases over on the edge of the opening. Here's kind of what that looks like closer up. So they piled these up. It creates some nice filtered sunlight for the snakes. It also creates some really nice escape cover so they can feel a little bit more comfortable hanging out here and be protected from predators. And as you can see, we found snakes right in these brush piles. So they're pretty well camouflaged. So what we do is we go in with our snake tongs and we kind of just push around the brush a little bit and see if we can get a snake to rattle. And that seems to be a really good way to detect their presence. It helps us find them in these areas. So I'm going to shift gears again and talk a little bit about prescribed burning. So prescribed burning is another tool to try and keep some of these wetlands and uplands open, but we need to do it cautiously, and we need to do it when the snakes are not active. So what we're working on doing, or what we've done, is adopting a protocol from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has developed guidance that's based on literature from Heilman, a 2016 paper. In that paper, he talks about a soil inversion, so a reversal that you can document through soil probes. So we have soil probes out at varying levels. So 1 meter, 60 centimeters, 30 centimeters, and at 10 centimeters. So what we look for, and we can plot these out, is, as you can see on this graph here, is when the soil inversion occurs, is the soil at that higher depth, so at 30 centimeters, it actually reverses and warms up faster than the 60 centimeters. So what we look for is where the 30 centimeters is higher than the 60 centimeters, and it has to be for 10 consecutive days. And when we see that signature inversion for those 10 days, then we know that the snakes are going to be emerging, and that's when we cut off any burning at that site or near that site. So what we've done is we've put out these soil temperature probes at these weather stations in proximity to where our Massasauga populations are. So we've done this in Pepin County, Jackson County, and down in Waukesha County. And we also have taken advantage of some other weather stations that U.S. Geological Survey has out in La Crosse and Juneau County. So it gives us really good coverage on where our Massasaugas are found, and we can track this emergence and try and shut off burning in those particular regions of the state when we meet that criteria. So I'm just wrapping up. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that we do for Massasauga rattlesnakes in the state. We have had a couple really exciting acquisitions at we didn't have a lot of priority sites remaining where we don't have public land, but we did have a couple, and we've made some good strides in getting some of those areas acquired into public ownership. So that's been pretty exciting. That's just happened in the last 6 months or a year, so some good headway on that. We're working a little bit with identifying impacts from climate change to the Massasauga rattlesnake and working on some mitigation strategies for the species. We also spend some time writing grants and doing reports on those grants to try and secure funding to do management work, surveys, and monitoring for the Massasauga. And then also addressing other threats through education and also through presentations like this to try and address issues like mossing, persecution, disease issues like snake fungal disease. And then we both spend time, of course, on working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and other states on recovery planning. And then finally, working with some of our GIS and GIS cartographers at the DNR to do some wetland mapping to get much more detailed information on some of the watersheds where Massasaugas occur to help us identify where these habitats are to maybe potentially target our surveys at other locations where we don't know as much or where we don't know that Massasaugas are occurring. So that's all we have for now, but we are happy to take any questions that you guys might have at this time.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Rory. That was an amazing presentation. Wow. Thank you so much. And then, yeah, if you guys want to type your questions in chat, otherwise feel free to unmute and ask our presenters.
I have a question about the survey. So you guys strictly survey only. Do you do any trapping to try and get them to make it a little easier on yourself, like a pitfall trap for snakes?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the drift fences and drift arrays, and we were using funnel traps for that. We only did that at one site so far. There is some literature out there that, yeah, definitely points to the drift fence arrays and funnel traps as being a really effective way of detecting Massasaugas.